Hello, and welcome to the sixth Fetter. We're going to talk about the 10 pointers of the sixth Fetter, and it's 10 things that we would like for you to look into, or to consider, or to work with when you're working with the sixth Fetter. So obviously, we assume that you have done the other lessons, and that you are on your way into the seventh Fetter. So we have 10 different pointers that we would like to talk to you about today.
We do.
Yeah, we do. The first pointer. If a line is created between a subject, you, and an object, where's the first point of the line in you assumed to be?
Yeah.
And you have done some really, really good inquiries about that. Where it's that about feeling. I also think I've done one of the exercises. That is about that feeling into the subject that is here and to an object that is out there. And then we have done the exercise going out to the object and looking back at the subject to see what is it that is there. But this question particularly is asking about where is that I, the starting point that I is supposed to be.
Yeah, because it really feels like when we first start looking at the world that there is a whole bunch of stuff out there, and that there's something in here that's somehow witnessing it, taking it all in, and putting ourselves in opposition to it, and comparing ourselves to it in some way. And so the point experiencing it, exactly. And so the point of this one is that you can only define the line by the two outer points. And so if it feels like I can look at something out there in the room, it can feel like I can draw a line from either here or here or here or here or someplace usually it's someplace within us. Oftentimes it's behind the eyes or in the chest, something like that. But it feels like we could draw that line out towards the object and create that sense of distance that way. And what we're pointing to is recognizing that in the visual field, there is no actual depth or spaciousness in the visual field the way that we see things. We're really, there is, no matter how deep it seems to be, there is just the visual field appearing here. And so it's not really a spoiler alert to say this, but it helps to recognize it yourself. But if we're looking at an object that's, midway up the, get my hand back in frame. If it's midway up the wall or something like that from us, our initial instinct is to say, I would draw the line from here out to it somewhere over there. But actually, if you notice in your real experience, if it feels in you like you are located here or here, it's easier to demonstrate if I use this one, though. If it feels like you are located here, that image is not appearing way out there. The image is appearing right here. And so actually, you would draw that line straight up to where that image is appearing in the wall. It's not going out. It's something that's higher than versus lower. It's something which is, we take it to be further away, but it's actually just higher on our visual perspective than things which are taken to be lower being closer. Things that are lower, being taken to be closer. So, but all of that is pointing to the fact that there is something that feels internally like we are grabbing something, that we are putting this other sense of the witnesser, or the feeling of some sort of physical subjecthood, usually that's here in a location separate from everything else. And so it's really recognizing where in you that feels like it is, and then how that distance is perceived visually, physically, auditorily. Yeah. And a lot of it does actually have to do, like everything, with sensations in the body.
Yeah, it's a super good point. It's also that a lot of people, when we look into where is the I, where does that feel, we usually say somewhere here in the head, but it's only because it's where the five senses are. We're seeing, we're smelling, we're tasting, we're hearing, and we are feeling, and everything is happening here. And it's the main reason why we assume that the I is here, because it's here we are experiencing, just like you're saying that if I'm looking at something out there, the image that is happening, even if I close my eyes, and the image that I'm seeing, it's seen in the mind.
Yeah.
So the distance is only here. So it's like here the self is located.
Yeah.
And it's also when we talk about the first fetter that a lot of people, they have that experience that the I is somewhere in my head.
Yeah, absolutely so. And that's why we're always pointing to breaking it down into its component parts.
Yeah.
Feel the sensations that are there, see the images and hear the sounds, and just recognize where things are appearing. And what we don't talk as much about in the first fetter that we talk about more in the sixth is that even the seeming appearance of, well, when I close my eyes, I'm visualizing a flower, and the flower is kind of like here. Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
We have that sort of instinct that it's there, but then the more you start to observe these things, and I think we'll talk more about this in the later pointers too, this whole idea of, is it even happening inside of your head? That's something else that can be questioned. So.
Yeah. It's also that really bizarre thing that if you close your eyes and you imagine your foot, for example, the foot you're seeing for your inner eye might not even be yours. Mm-hmm. It might be somebody else's foot, or a random foot, and when you look at it, it's not even a clear cut foot. It's like hazy, and it's more like an assumption of what it is that you're looking at. Oh, it's a foot, but it's not even the real thing. And to place it in space, the eyes go slowly downwards.
It's true.
So we have that another identification and a feeling of me being here and something being away from me, just because the eyes does that movement, and that movement is then another little bubble of identification that is happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I just want to, because I can't remember if we're talking about it later, it's about that you can only experience things in the five senses: the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Yep. And what we talk about with the feathers is that in the seeing, it's just the seeing. It's not what you assume that you see. It's just what you see. And also why we have all the exercises where we're really, really looking at something. So we're not recognizing, but really, really looking. And the same with hearing. In the heard, there's simply the heard, not what you assume that you're hearing, but what you're actually hearing. And then we have like a little appendix to every single one, which is thought, which is creating a full identification of it. Because what if I say, think of a rose, you will be thinking about a rose that you have seen. You will not imagine a rose that you have never seen. You can only refer to your backpack of all your experiences throughout your life, which actually makes that little appendix quite limited.
It does. Because
you can only think of things you have seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched.
Yep.
You cannot imagine how it would be to see, hear, smell, taste, touch something that you do not know already.
Yeah.
And that is where the limited part comes about it, and why in the 10th fetter we with such arrogance can say you do not know anything. Because you only know what you know. You only recognize or experience what you already know.
Absolutely. And I think we do get to that later on in the
we do. I can't remember.
It's like some of the last ones. I think we'll be talking about that.
That's just amazing. So the first ponder: if a line is created between a subject you and an object, where's the first point of the line in you assumed to be? I think that was really good.
Yeah, and it really, just as a reminder, it really comes down to the felt sense in the body of where it really is, that it feels like this is the location that's separate from that thing out there.
Yeah.
And you can do that just by looking at an object and holding your gaze on it long enough, and you'll start to feel that sort of pulling back into something. And then that's kind of your clue as to where you seem to be bringing that information into, like it's being aggregated here or someplace else. And then you just notice that physical sensation, and is that physical sensation actually
Are you or just
or
a
a
physical?
witness, or
Or is it just a physical sensation?
exactly.
Yeah.
Can it do something? Can it
Yeah.
really, like, if you feel like, I know that that is a flower pot because I'm looking at the flower pot and there's something here that says flower pot, does that sensation actually know that that's a flower
That's
pot?
a flower pot.
Yeah.
Is that sensation similar, with all flower pots that you
Exactly.
see, or
Yeah.
and is that a very
It's a
particular,
very particular
very
flower pot
particular,
sensation.
yeah, flower pot
Yeah.
sensation?
Yeah.
We have a full library, so
We do.
of course it's not. But it's just looking into that and really starting to picking it apart, because a lot of that, what you talk about with that push pull that we have, that we assume that just because we have a physical sensation attached to it, that makes it real.
Yeah.
That makes it real. It's beautiful.
I think good.
Second pointer.
If a sound is heard, can you find a distance between the sound and where it is being heard? So similar to the first one, but in terms of the auditory field, it's to recognize that our initial way of hearing things is to not only label exactly what it is immediately when we hear it, but beyond that, even if we just bring it to the direct experience of an actual sound, that sound is being triangulated between, we generally have two ears. The brain is hearing that there's more sound coming into this ear than that ear, and so it's figuring out that it seems to be at such a distance out from that direction, and it's probably, that way versus this way, and maybe how far it is based on what it thinks it is. And then it's doing all these calculations. So our initial assumption whenever we hear anything is that it is at a certain distance from us. And there are other things I think go into this, like if we're talking about inside of a room, there's like room acoustics and the reflection from the walls and things like that do give us a sense of distance based on that, which again is just completely subconscious. It's, but it's the way that, bats echolocate and humans have learned to use echolocation. So it's an amazing thing, but it is something which we can kind of break down by really observing the sounds where they appear and recognizing exactly what it is in our experience that is giving us those cues that sound is happening somewhere out there and not here. And then that's when we can actually feel that all the sounds are happening in here because they are literally being created in here. No matter what sound is happening out there.
It doesn't have a sound on its own out there.
It's just waves moving through the air until they hit an eardrum and become electrical signals that become translated into something by the brain. All of it's happening in there. So we're looking to be very clear about our experience of those sounds to basically put enough attention on them that we start to lose that sense of distance that's an overlay on it, and just really hear them as close as can possibly be. And then recognizing, like the first pointer, is there something here which seems separate from it? Does it feel like there is a witness, a hearer, or something somewhere in your experience which is putting itself, even if those sounds are like right here, does it still feel like there's a little listener with two little ears somewhere inside the head who's like still listening? It's like we are with headphones on. It's like it's still at a distance. I can tell that it's not happening like directly in the center of my skull. So what is it about your experience that feels like there is something there which is separate from the hearing and keeping it from just being the heard?
Yeah. Two things about that. See if I can remember both. No, it's me. The first thing is also that it's really fun to play with about hearing. That when you're out and about, it's easier when you're outside because there's so many different sounds outside. But really, really start to play with your assumptions about things. So when you hear a bird, then ask yourself, how do you know that is a bird? Well, I know how a bird sounds. Are you sure? Yeah. Are you sure? Keep, asking yourself that. And then you will start to notice that even things that you know what is, it starts to sound differently. Just like when we did the exercise where you're sitting and looking at the cone, or you're sitting and looking at something, the more you look at it, the more it changes and actually looks different.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the hearing, that whatever you hear, the first thing is just you recognizing you don't even really hear it, you just recognize. But if you really, really pay attention and you keep asking yourself, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Then it really changes and it starts to become so interesting. Because so many other things are happening at the same time, which is really fun to explore. It's why the sixth fetter is the fun fetter.
It really is. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking of when you were sitting and saying it, is that analogy you had with a sound being heard, and it's like there's someone inside that is sitting and hearing. So it's like there's the meat suit, and inside the meat suit is a little fella. Yeah, with headphones on that are hearing everything. So, and you also made that inquiry for the retreat. That is really good, where you keep asking about, but who is observing that? Who is observing that observing of the sound? So the sound you're hearing is observed, but who is then observing the observing of the sound? And you can just keep picking it apart and apart and apart and apart, because there's so many layers of almost invisible identification that we put on anything that our senses pick up. Because it is how we navigate the world. It
is. And then the also, I think the thing to point to in that also is that notice if we have the idea that, we can do this like infinite regress of this is me, now I'm aware of me, now I'm aware of me again, and then I'm aware of me again, and it goes back. But if you actually notice really closely into your experience, what you'll see is that it's not that sorry, I need the second hand. that the first me is there, and then we have this idea that there's a second me that's sitting back watching it, and then another one watching that. But what we need to look at is actually this one is no longer here anymore. You have this one, and then it's basically replaced by one that's back here that is remembering what that was like. And you're maybe now this is being created by the appearance of the memory of that first one. And then there's another one that is remembering the appearance of that and seeing it. But these are all dropping away as we go further and further back. So we have this false continuity of consciousness that is creating this infinite regress. So you have to really be very, very clear when you're watching this. What are you actually being aware of? What are you actually observing in that moment?
Yeah. And that is also why it's so interesting to use the five senses for that. Because that is happening with the five senses all the time. And it is in that regressing that there is that sense of an identification to it. Because even though we play with, for example, the seventh fetter and saying that there's only now, the mind still has a memory of, a second ago all the time. And that falling away of that is still observed by another part, which is really interesting to look into.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Right.
Love it. Third one. Is it possible for any sensory phenomenon, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, to be experienced without it constantly changing? And I love this one so much because no matter what you do, no matter what we did it with the exercise where we were sitting looking at the cone, where no matter what you look at, it changes. You look at something, for example, that's a glass standing right there. And it's just, you see it right away. That's a glass, water in it, and everybody knows that. But when you really sit and look at it, first there's the layer of assumption. It could be vodka.
Could be.
And it could be a sugar glass.
Yeah. I could shatter it in my hand.
Exactly, like one of those film ones.
Yeah.
It could be a plastic glass. It could actually just be, if you don't see the water moving, it could be, plastic and then just with a painted line in it. Absolutely. It could be so many things. That's the first layer of it. The other layer is that when we're sitting
Sorry. I was actually looking, this is just a dark oval. That's kind of like...
Yeah, true.
That is a two-dimensional oval. But the mind immediately wants to put it into the depth of the glass.
And it could also be quicksilver. It looks a bit like quicksilver.
Like mercury, yeah.
Yeah, mercury.
That does.
That's really interesting. But it's always
This is what we do every day, people. Welcome to a moment of insight into our life.
This is what we do.
We just sit here staring at glasses for hours.
It's very, very close to that.
It really
very,
is.
very close to that.
It really is.
We were out today and looking at Tony goes like, oh, look at the sky, and it's just like.
I'm pretty sure that most strangers think I'm high all the time when I'm walking around.
And it's just two adults standing, gazing. Like we were out and we were standing looking at the sky and some leaves, and somebody, what are you looking at?
like they thought there was something like really fascinating that they would find like super interesting. It's like, do you see the gradient of the sky? like the way that the blue gets really dark up above and it just becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. They were like, oh yeah. Off they go.
Oh God. Oh, the madness.
The madness.
Anyways, so
back to the glass.
That
is not a glass.
So the first layer is obviously to look at your assumptions, that your assumption is just what you're assuming. But the second layer is also that when you're sitting and looking at it, it changes all the time. And you have that with all your senses, with your sense of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. It's why when we do the exercise, when you're sitting and holding something, or when you are sitting and, for example, the exercise with the cup that we also have here in the 6 Fetter, where you're sitting and holding the cup, that when you close your eyes after a while, it feels like the cup is morphing and changing, and it feels different in your hand, and all of a sudden it's disappeared. Yeah. You can't feel the cup anymore. And so there's none of the senses that we rely on. We rely on the 5 senses, and we say that you can only rely on the 5 senses, but even those you can't rely on because they're morphing and changing all the time. So the message that the brain is picking up from the 5 senses is changing all the time, and that is the paradox of when we're saying in the seeing there's just the seen, and in the heard there's only the heard. That is it's such a paradox because there's not even that. Yeah. Not even that. No. That is changing as well.
And you can also even notice if you try to hold your gaze on one object in front of you, your eyes are constantly doing these little darting motions. You're actually not seeing the whole object. You're seeing little fragments of it that are constantly jutting back and forth, being kind of created into something stable. But you're never really seeing the whole of something. You're always like taking in bits and bits and bits and bits. And seeing it kind of ad hoc that way. But
it's also why, for example, that if you look at something right now and you close your eyes and then you just keep your head where it is, but just look a bit to the left and open your eyes and close your eyes and look straight ahead again and open your eyes. Just doing that is super confusing.
It is.
It's so confusing because the mind expects, even though it is doing the darting all the time, it still expects some kind of continuity to what it sees, even though it is going like that all the time. Yeah. So when you cheat your brain like that, you get all dizzy and confused.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Yeah.
And this popped up before, and I'm not sure if it's quite as relevant with this one. I think it's partially relevant with this one, partially with the one before too. Is that it's something that I think we all have experienced as kids and also as adults, but where you repeat something like a word over and over again until it loses its meaning. Yeah. And it's that kind of a thing where we're creating this extra layer of something which we don't even recognize. So if I said the word glass, or apple might be a better one because glass can also be like a window or something. But if I say apple, you have an immediate idea of what that is. And then the more we repeat the word apple, 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 eventually it starts to become just a strange sound that loses that connotation.
It becomes more beat.
It does. Even if we do it arrhythmically, it's still going to have that kind of a thing. And so it's that it's the fact that it's it's an additional layer that we're putting on it, just like when we look at this and have this immediate recognition of what we think it is, and that it's always going to be this glass, and it's always stable, and it's always the same thing. You can look at this glass 1,000 times, and you're always going to see something slightly different in it, something. So we're taking the label off and being with the actual experience of the thing.
But also because there are other factors that make. I mean, if the sun was shining in on the glass, it would look different. If it was darkness, it would look different. You know, if we had colored glasses on, it would look different.
Like just
if it was clean, it would look different.
Yeah, nobody needs a clean glass. But really, like, and the tiniest little movement of the head creates a completely different different panorama of images and sensations to it.
So even when we say that they're just the five senses and it's the only thing you can rely on, even that you can't rely on.
You can't rely on it.
It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And that is just so fascinating to explore.
It is.
Amazing.
All right. Fourth pointer. What is an object without a subjective conceptualization?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It really is a good one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're going.
Yeah, so we're, by virtue of the way that we talk about things in the world, and by the virtue of the way that we talk about us, we are constantly creating, by language, this duality between what we think we are and what something else is. And we're constantly defining one thing by the not thing of something else. And all of that is conceptualization. If you could really sit here with absolutely no conceptualization of what anything is, in your visual field, in the auditory field, in the physical field, and between all of them even, you cannot tell where one thing begins and another thing ends. It all becomes one giant, and not even a blur, because it's not like the boundaries have to be dissolved that way, where it just looks like a giant watercolor that you can't see, make anything out of. It's just that everything is of the same material in the same form, almost like if you had like a relief cutout on like if you take like a tree and then they have like one solid chunk of wood and then they do a relief cutout. You can say like, okay, well, there's a dragon and there's a temple and there's a person, but it's all the same wood, and realistically there is no boundary between the outlines of any of those things. It's our view of saying, well, this is coming out a little bit more than that, and I can find it's that whole pareidolia thing where we can find patterns and recognize things in anything.
Yeah, look at clouds and it turns into elephants and
paneling in the walls becoming faces and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So without that, it is still just one piece of solid wood. Same with our visual experience. It's not water glasses and computers and balloons and flower pots. It's one homogeneous image, which has no separation between, anything in it.
Yeah, I would like to talk more about that. I'm just sitting and thinking about the most like obvious part of it as well, is that, like in the Tao where it says that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, that whatever you can mention, the moment you put a label on it, the moment you mention what it is, you're limiting what it actually is.
Absolutely.
And it's also why we put so much emphasis on that whenever you have a sensation in the body, that feedback loop that you have with a sensation in the body and a thought, or a thought that is giving a sensation in the body, that whenever a sensation in the body is happening, you can use the thought that is connected with it as a hologram, kind of like reminding you, somebody says something to you and you get really, you feel so shameful, let's say. Whatever they say, it's just a hologram. You don't need to sit and talk about what they say, for hours and hours and hours, because that is minimizing the experience that you actually have. Yeah. So you have to feel into the body. How does it feel? We say it's shame, but by saying it's shame, you're minimizing the experience. Absolutely. So you have to detach that label of it. Yep. So you just sit with sensory experience, and that, like we just talked about, it will move, it will change. You have constricted, you can't breathe, and you just cannot be in a body where it's constricted and I can't breathe. If you allow yourself just to sit with it, after 7 to 11 seconds, it's gone.
Yeah.
It has changed, and now it's something else, because nothing stays the same ever.
Yeah.
But if you keep the label on where you say it's shame, you will keep feeling the shame from the label, not from the sensory experience. And that is why talk therapy is great, and you get things up and you can see it from different angles, but it's only talking about the label.
Yeah.
What we want you to is remove the label, remove that, because it's minimizing the experience, and stay with the full experience in the body. How does it feel to be in the body? Because any type of label we put on anything is minimizing what it actually is.
It is. Just sit there and go shame, 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 shame.
And then
shame,
it disappears. Apple,
Yeah, exactly. And then gone. Sorted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then coming back to the other end of it again, because I love that, is also just what we have spoken about, like in the first and second, about that feeling of the subject in here. We can start to recognize that just as we can sense the whole outside visual field as one thing without boundaries, without concepts, we can recognize that there's no separation. If we don't have a concept of this sensation in the body equals me, this sensation is something different from the visual field, this physical sensation is different from the auditory field. If we don't create those artificial distinctions, then things start to blend together where all of a sudden, of course, there's no subject here versus the objects, but also you can't even tell necessarily how one sense field is experienced compared to another one. And so we're really looking at breaking down all of the perceived barriers between things based on that sort of conceptualization.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize that we are not talking about the radical non-dualist. That is, it's not in that what do you call it, absolute or ultimate field. It's not that field we're talking about. We are talking about in your direct experience.
Yeah. This has nothing to do with objective reality.
No.
So a lot of people will be like, but there's a road out there and I have to get in the car to drive to the store. And so how can there not be distance? Because I can't just reach my hand out and,
to the store.
Or like, I'm going to go, like, my finger is going to go visit Disney World right now. It's there, like, of course. What we're talking about is your internal perception of the world and the way that it's created. It has nothing to do with any sort of objective, absolute, external reality, as it may or may not be. The whole point is just that we do not, and we never will have access to however it really is.
And it's also why I really want to emphasize that we are talking about perceptions.
Exactly.
We're talking about perceptions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I just think it's so important, because it is everything that we do, that it's all about, how it feels in the body. How is it actually experienced in the body? And sitting and talking about abstracts and about, it's not helpful.
No.
It's not helpful.
No, and it's, we can take these things as a way of like denying some sort of practical, usefulness to the reality of 3 dimensions and, spaciousness and all of that. There are functional aspects of all of that which we don't really want to get rid of. We don't need to get rid of them. It's enough to notice the ways in which those perceptions are creating this additional sense of self, of agency, of witnessing, of all of that, which is really what we're doing this for. It doesn't matter if your vision stays 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional. It's irrelevant to the point, which is there something in here which seems to be at a distance from that thing?
Yeah.
That distance is creating the other point in the line that's here. Without that, it doesn't matter how the perception actually comes through. It's just a visual experience, and it can change. It might go
And
flip back and forth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
all the time.
Exactly. So it doesn't. I think we hear a lot. It's like, well, people expect that if they have any sort of Fetter 6 experience, it's going to be like the collapsing of vision into 2 dimensions and things like that. And if they don't, or if they're not living that permanently, it's like, oh, well, it must still be there.
Then it hasn't fallen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like getting contact with, does it still feel like there's something here which is separate from what's out there? Yes, even if there's nothing here and that is gone, this is still going to have to get up out of this couch to go pee. Yeah. We still have to actually traverse the space around us, even if it seems to be 2-dimensional suddenly. You'll never be able to just think yourself into the refrigerator to get a drink or to the bed to go to sleep.
Yeah, or think yourself not thirsty.
Yeah, exactly.
And being fully hydrated.
Yeah.
Because you thought of it.
Right. Yeah, there are biological realities here, biological practicalities here.
I really like that you're pointing to that, because it's kind of like a lot of people have that assumption that when you wake up, everything is just completely different, and it is different, but not the way that there isn't a sofa and a husband and a computer and and
it creates so much fear for people, because they have this idea that, okay, so if there's no boundary and there's no me and there's no really not anything there, then they picture themselves as just being some vaguely conscious thing or floating. Oftentimes it's like floating in like a black void.
Yeah.
It's like this idea that there's like, I'm not me, and yet in the imagination of that black void, there's still something which is floating aware in the black void. And it causes so much fear, because people are like, it's like this fear of absolute annihilation, just to see that there is no boundary between things the way that we perceive them to be.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to keep
really
harping
really
on that.
important to mention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5th pointer. Do you see that language is inadequate in describing reality, and even our conceptualizations are unable to grasp the totality of experience as it arises?
You got a mouthful of one there. That was
did.
That was a really long one.
Conceptualizations are unable to grasp the totality of experience. And it's a bit like what we just talked about, that whatever you perceive is based on what you already know. That you cannot see something that you don't know what is. Your mind will start to create something, created to look like something, like we talked about when walking out and it was dark, and there would be something, morphing into different things. Then it would be a dog, then it would be a cat, then it would be, it's a bin. That the mind is trying to create it into being something. And that when you're just sitting and looking at things, your mind is creating a story about everything you see. There's not anything that you look at that you write. When you look at it, it's gonna feel like, I know what everything is, but it's only because your mind has put a little label on everything, and the mind thinks, I know what everything is. But there could be something standing, like an African fertility staff, whatever, jug in the corner, and you will look at it and you will just go like, that's a beer mug.
Yeah, it's
because the mind will just create a concept out of something
that's seen.
Is seen and known that, I know a beer mug. That's a beer mug.
Yeah.
And that is happening even when and most times you're not even aware of it. Yeah. That you can walk in like those peculiar stores, and think that you know what everything is. But it's only because your mind has created a little label and is assuming what it is that you're actually seeing.
Yeah, I love there's some like those AI images that are, you can't like they're intentionally made so that you can't tell what anything is, but it seems familiar in some way. Yeah. And you can feel what it does to the brain. The brain is just like grasping to try to make something into something else, and it can't quite do it. And it feels incredibly uncomfortable to be in that
You
state
have a
of.
really good picture where both of us, we're gonna put it in so you can see it now. You have a really good picture that both of us really like it, and we have no idea why we like it. It looked really nice, and I really, really liked it, and I have no idea what it is I'm looking
Yeah.
at. But it does something to the mind. So the brain thinks that, oh, this is that, and this, I can't remember what is on the photo right
Yeah,
now.
I don't remember
No.
specifically. We did too many of them. But also, I think we should post because there is one that probably a lot of people who are watching this have seen, but because it's a really famous one when it first came out. It was like sort of at the dawn of AI, like a year ago, and but it was one of those ones that like everybody was passing around online because it was like such a did a weird thing to the mind. It makes you almost queasy trying to grasp what it is, and it's nothing. But it's like you want to make it into things.
Yeah.
So we can post that too.
Yeah.
I'll try to find
Because
that.
it's really funny how the mind is trying all the time to create concepts out of things. It's also one of the things that we say a lot about with the feathers. Let me just get back to the question.
Yeah, I kind of
think
forget
we-
that. Do you see that language is inadequate in describing reality, and even our conceptualizations are unable to grasp the totality of experience as it arises? So really,
We also need to get back to that part.
I think so, yeah. We get a bit divergent there. Yeah, it's the ineffability of it that, like, going back to the glass, you could not use language to describe all of the facets of this experience that is so immediately readily available and grasped in the visual sense or in the felt sense while I'm holding it. And then the concept of glass is woefully inadequate to describe that. I mean, if we just think glass, it could have an infinite number of different forms, shapes, colors, sizes, textures, materials.
But it's also that part that whatever arises, whatever arises in our experience. Thank you. Thank you. that whatever arises in our experience, again, is limited, and you cannot describe it before it's already gone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's arising so quickly and with so many labels and so many experiences that it's already gone. If I'm looking out the window, seeing all the trees, all the things that are happening in my experience are already gone before I start to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can have a book of 700 pages that's just describing the experience of that tree trunk.
Yeah. And yet it still doesn't capture the actuality.
No, exactly.
Of it.
Yeah. And also, like we talked about, like I said with the Tao, that when you describe it, you minimize it. Yeah. Okay, next one. A 6 feather is fun.
It is. It's the best feather.
We say that about every feather, don't we? Oh, it's the best feather.
This is a particularly fun one to work with, though. 6-pointer. How do you know where the boundary between the inside and the outside of the body is? Is it experienced or is it an assumption?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yes.
It's a big topic.
It is, and it's one of those that we do in the beginning where we do those feel the body and feel the boundary of the body. For example, right now, if you just close your eyes and you feel your foot, and you feel the sock on the foot, can you describe where the foot ends and the sock begins? And now I would like for you to have your attention on your stomach. And you feel your shirt on the skin of your stomach. I would like for you to feel that from the inside out. So feel the stomach from the inside. And feel the boundary between the inside of the stomach and the shirt. Where where does the stomach end and where does it become a shirt? Thank you.
And then also, can you see it? Can you feel it from the outside of the shirt? Can you feel what it feels like to feel the inside of or the outside? Feel the stomach from the outside of the shirt. But notice how much of that is coming from the experience of the felt sensation itself, and how much you're relying on visual images of maybe the darkness inside the stomach and the visualization of the shirt material that you're wearing, and then this kind of visualized idea of what the outside air or the outside space looks like around the outside of the stomach or the shirt, and then looking back the other way. So how much of your experience is a visual fantasy image,
I know.
and how much of it is just really actual sensation?
Yeah, yeah. And it's also fun if you think about it back to what we just did with the foot and the sock. How much of that was actually fantasy,
Exactly.
and how much was actually the foot feeling the sock, and were you completely sure of where the foot was in space when you're sitting with your closed eyes?
Yeah,
It's a
really
funny
absurd,
thing.
yeah.
It's a funny thing, and also going from the foot to the stomach. It's a funny thing because it's just, yeah.
So then we can investigate what it feels like, where if it feels like there's an inside and an outside, then we're assuming that everything out here is outside, and that there's something inside that maybe I can feel, or if I close my eyes, I can kind of visualize. And we usually visualize it as sort of pure darkness inside of this bubble with all of the world stretching out there. But with your eyes open, can you get the sense, like looking down at the body, that you have no actual access to the internal view of anything? Literally, all you are seeing is always outside. We can't turn our eyes around to turn back inside. We can't see anything inside the body. The actual perception that you have of the visual field has no inside to it. It is only external, right? So we can look at it from that perspective first and just say that everything we're seeing is out there. We can then flip it around and do the kind of thought experiment, which can be kind of trippy, but imagining that everything that you see is far out into the farthest reaches of the sky and the moon and the sun and everything that you can see. All of that is actually happening inside the bubble of your own virtual reality helmet. All of this is happening the way that you're perceiving it in your own personal space. That there's actually no such thing as outside. That everything you experience is purely inside of your own little bubble. So you can feel it from both, and recognizing that if both are true, then neither are true.
And also, if I see my bubble as the way that I see it, and you see your bubble the way that you see it, and both of us are right, then none of it can be true.
Exactly. So get really curious about your actual experience of it from both directions. And we can do this with the felt sense to feel, if it feels like you have a feeling of the body from the inside, then recognizing where that is showing up, it's easier oftentimes with the eyes closed to feel the body, the sensations of the body. But you'll start to recognize as you put more and more attention on that you can't feel that it's actually happening within the boundaries of the skin. It's happening somewhere out somewhere, and it's going to keep changing, and it might get bigger and bigger. And
Yeah. I love. It's one of my favorite meditations to lead people through that experience. When you sit and you close your eyes and you just feel how everything is just dissolving, and the foot is no longer at the end of the extension of the body. It's just something floating in space somewhere. And even a headache is like that, or a tummy ache, or any kind of pain. pain that we can have in the body is just a sensation floating in space.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so we can use all of the well, also the auditory field is a great one too while we're on it, because our initial thought is that sounds that sound like, the dog barking outside or the cars driving or something, that sounds like it's out there, but you can perceive that the more you just focus on the direct experience of the sound itself, that starts to become part of this internal bubble where, again, if the sound is being created by the eardrums, all that's being created in the brain, we can perceive that as happening as closely internal as the feeling of your stomach rumbling when you're hungry. But we can also recognize that if we flip it around, that it is completely outside, and the knowing of it is happening in the same place that it is happening. And so there is also no inside, that we can really flip back and forth with the perception. And that starts to break down the certainty of, I am in here, everything else is out there.
You smell really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really nice.
And that is happening inside of you.
It is.
There's no actual smell here. That is completely going into the nose, being created inside the mind.
Still like it.
I'm glad.
Okay. So was that it? Or is it an assumption? I would like to touch a bit on the assumption that how much, but we have already said that, but it's just because it cannot be said too many times, that whatever you assume to be reality is based on your bullshit backpack.
Yep.
It's based on something that you already know. And we're back to the fertility mug and the beer mug in the corner. That whatever you assume to be in a certain way, if somebody's reacting to something you say and you react to what they say, you're not reacting to what they actually say or what is actually happening right now. You're acting on your assumption of what you think is happening right now. And that is just an extension of what is happening in the 5 sense fields.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. 7. Have you realized that the feeling of a need to see through the 6 fetter is a reinforcement of the subject-object delusion? And we want to point to that because it's one of the things that often happen when you work with a fetter. If you still have the feeling that you want to work with one fetter at a time, and you want one fetter to fall before you move on to work with the other one, then at some point you always get to the point where you start to get impatient. And you have but everything is flat. I see everything flat now. And there's so much reinforcing of the subject-object in that. And it's also one of the reasons why we keep coming back to talking about the wheel of identification, that all of it is happening at the same time. It's just about noticing, this is a 6 fetter experience, this is a 4th fetter, this is a 7th fetter. All that is happening at the same time. It's because we're identifying all the time. Yeah. So if you start to become a pit bull about the 6 fetter and about the subject-object delusion and dissolving that, just be aware that you're not reinforcing the subject-object experience.
Exactly.
Because it is about dissolving boundaries, and you need to create boundaries to have an idea that it has fallen, and that means that it hasn't.
Yeah, I mean, well said. Ultimately, the recognition is that there is nothing. Well, this is. I think hopefully we're going to get to this. Actually, I can't remember. Yeah, I'll save that part because I think we might be talking about that in a bit. But teaser. Bit of a cliffhanger there. No, that if there really is just one experience that's happening with no experiencer of it or any of that, then the whole idea about needing to strive and struggle and have that sense of So we used, actually we didn't use the word, but I was thinking there's another word in there that wasn't. But having that sense of struggle to successfully complete a task and to successfully, check off the sixth Fetter box and all of that is just reinforcing that same sense of the one who, it's both first Fetter and sixth Fetter,
Yes.
of the one who can do it and who can achieve it and who is going to be in a different state after having dropped the sixth Fetter. And there's
that is so reinforcing.
Yeah, it is. And there's also there's still hanging on of this idea of like third Fetter, that I'm doing this for the purpose of, whatever you think you're going to get after the sixth Fetter has been seen through, let all of that go and just come back to the curiosity and that sort of open, like either I refer to it, it's like either as an anthropologist looking at the remnants of an old civilization that they have no direct connection to. It's just pure curiosity and joy at exploration. Yeah. Or like a child just, playing outside,
curious
and
just
super curious about everything.
Yeah.
Just experience it, holding absolutely no hooks into, I have to see through this. I have to, I have to like force myself to see two-dimensional, and that's such a thing. It creates such a feeling such a feeling of resistance to the actual three-dimensional experience, instead of just recognizing what's there, relaxing and allowing it to just dissolve into what it is without the additional layers of overlays and conceptualizations.
Yeah, we have this pointer because we really just want to remind you of being curious.
Yeah.
That the five senses is everything, is all you have in your perception: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. That's it. Then you have a little appendix of a thought attached to everything, and that's it. Off you go.
I pictured a little physical appendix.
Yeah, me too.
I was just like,
me too. Me too. That is kind of like,
yeah, and it does nothing, ironically.
Absolutely.
Like, just like the appendix.
Yeah. It's part of the immune system, but here we go. Okay, never mind.
It's conventional conventional conceptualizations of the appendix. It's a completely irrelevant body part. We come with spare parts, just like when you put together a home gym, it comes with some extra parts. Yeah, some of those too.
Any IKEA shelving, we know that. That's a spare part.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it's here just to remind you of being curious, really, really being curious, and keep asking yourself, are you sure about that? Because there's so many fun things to explore with the sixth Fetter.
Love it.
Perfect. 8.
Eighth pointer. Whatever you look at right now is not how you think it is. See it or experience it. It is not even what you know it to be or not to be. Your representation of it is not indicative of the actual inherent nature of anything.
Yeah, but I would like, because we have touched on it.
Yeah.
We have touched on many different aspects of it.
Yeah.
But it's also really inviting you to sit down, be humble. Kendrick Lamar. Shout out to Kendrick Lamar.
Shout out to Kendrick. Just so everybody knows, most of the time when we're talking or doing inquiry sessions or something, we are always like
ending up with Kendrick
Lamar. It doesn't take much. Like virtually anything that anybody says can lead back to a Kendrick lyric. So
yeah.
So
if we're sitting and giggling, it's usually about Kendrick.
Yeah.
Anyways, so sit down and and look at something, and then really, really be curious to what it is you're seeing. You can look at a plant and really be curious and touch it. Really be curious to how it feels. Smell it. Really be curious to what you smell. Because whatever you think you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, it's not that. It's not that. It's not that.
No, and it points back to the sort of deeper scientific truth of the fact that we have no access to the actual objective reality beyond our perceptions.
Yeah.
That I like Dennis Hoffman's explanation or his kind of view that everything that we see is like a computer interface where on the computer screen you have all of the icons for all of the programs. You can click on one, you can make things work, you know how to do it, but that icon has no correlation to the code that's running underneath it that's making the Word document or anything else work. And it's the same thing with our experience. We have really, convenient ways of saying that this is a glass that has water, that when I'm thirsty, I drink this and I feel better. But other than that, I have no direct connection to have any clue of what that is. And then if we even break that down, using scientific means to the molecular level or the atomic level or subatomic level and the quantum level and all of that, there is no amount of glass in this glass.
No.
There's no water in this glass of water. It is the same fundamental starting points that is everything here and everywhere else.
Yeah.
So everything is made up of the same building blocks.
Yeah.
So on that purely intellectual scientific level, there's a certain truth behind that.
Yeah.
But it's to point to the fact that we cannot trust our experience of anything to be the real actual experience of what it is. It's only our interface for it.
It also reminds me of that Buddhist thing about, a table. At what point does a table actually become a table?
Yeah.
If you have a full table and you remove one leg of the table, is it still a table? If you start to sandpaper away the top of it, how much can you actually sandpaper away until it's not a table anymore? And so it's also that is just arbitrary to what we are defining as something that is, which it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Speaking of labels, did I call him Dennis Hoffman? It's Donald Hoffman. I'm not sure which name popped out. It was a D name, but I don't think it was the correct one.
D. Hoffman.
It was D. Hoffman.
It sounds very German.
D. Hoffman. D. Hoffman. but there's...
He's gonna appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Probably more than you call him Dennis.
but there's the point of labels.
Has
absolutely no... The name has
Donna Hoffman.
The name has no correlation to the actuality of the physical structure that we're naming Donald Hoffman or Dennis Hoffman or Donna Hoffman. And it has nothing even less to do with his internal experience of what it is to be him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. I love that everything we say we end with love it. It's so good that we absolutely agree on.
we love what we do.
What we are doing is excellent.
Our work is great.
Absolutely excellent. Oh, be humble.
Be humble.
Okay, 9th pointer.
Is this when you?
It's me.
Okay.
It's me. Have you noticed how ekulelia is creating a continuity of experiences, and Gestalt is fulfilling the absent?
We should probably define those terms too, in case everybody isn't.
Sure. Ekulelia is when you what example can we give?
I would say an earworm is a really good example of it, where you hear a sound like Kendrick Lamar's Humble, for instance.
Yeah.
And then it's constantly going over and over in the head. Even if you're not like consciously doing it and singing along, it's like just playing on a loop in the mind.
Yeah. And that is creating that continuity. It's also that kind of where you finish,
the other sentence.
Yeah, the other sentence, but also the dun da 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 da.
Dun, dun.
You shouldn't do it. I should do it.
Oh shit! Sorry.
So dun da 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 da. So what you just did, because Todd didn't.
Just edit it out. Cut it out in post.
No, but that is ekulelia. That is where we have an earworm, or we we continue something which is not there. And that is part of the 6-7 fetter now, that is creating a sensation of continuity. Us even creating a sentence and starting to talk is based on a continuity.
And if I could just, before we go on to the Gestalt part of it, something that would point to in some of the inquiries is that what we take to be our constant present experience, oftentimes we'll have very quick flashes of, I'm seeing this glass, and then I'm checking back in with a very quick snapshot of what this glass looked like now, and then catching the present tense version of it, and then reflecting back to the and so we're creating this bouncing back and forth with everything that we see all the time. And so part of that is creating this sense of, it's this repetition of things. Or if you've heard, it's something that I've always done, is when I hear people talk, if it's something that I'm trying to really pay attention to and learn from, I'll be repeating the sentences that just came over and over again, and it's like it locks it in. It's like that making it yours or something. Yeah. And so we always have this experience of hearing and seeing things over and over and over again, sort of bouncing back and forth in time between present and then what just happened, present just happened, present just happened.
It's also a really good point, because I know that a lot of artists, we do that we hear something or we say something and then we repeat it in our head, or some mouth it out. Yeah. But a lot of neurotypical people do that too. They're just not aware of it. So there is that kind of like hearing something and then reflecting up in the brain and then hearing it. So it kind of like continues and it's manifested in a way, so it kind of becomes more real because it has been repeated over and over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. I notice I do this, and I don't know if everybody does this or if this is just a weird idiosyncrasy that I notice. But actually, like when you're talking, like when you're doing that, I'm not repeating whole sentences. I'm repeating every word. So it's like as you're saying it, it's like
it's almost like also when you speak that I almost know what you're gonna say.
Exactly.
The moment you say it, I'm saying it too in my head, and that is that ecolalia thing where and it also creates that sensation of belonging, or in an argument, actually arguing with someone, or so it creates that bouncing back and forth. Because of the ecolalia.
Yeah. Porcupine. You weren't expecting that, were you?
I was.
Got me.
So that ecolalia is creating that continuity of experience, and then Gestalt. Whatever is not there, your mind is filling in without you even being aware. For example, you're looking at the two of us, and you assume we have legs. You don't know that. You've never seen us stand. We could easily not have legs at all, but you assume that we have.
You assume that we have backs.
You assume you have a back of a head.
Yeah. I've never seen it. I don't think it exists. But I was looking around for like another solid object, and I'm like, this doesn't really work for that.
No.
A shoe, perhaps.
No, but I have the bottle here.
Okay. Still somewhat translucent, but
it's too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dum, 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 dum.
We have a prayer wheel, so that is here. And in your view, I'm sure you're seeing this as a circular image, which probably has a back that is very, very similar to the front, and that has maybe that it has a little chain that hangs off of it with a little ball that swings. But you can't actually see any of that. What you're looking at right now is a two-dimensional image. It's not only two-dimensional because you're seeing it in two dimensions, but it's being portrayed on a two-dimensional screen. So literally everything that you're seeing right here is completely two-dimensional. Your mind is putting any sense of depth to it, that this is in front of this, which is in front of that, or that there's any like back behind a Pernilla instead of just her being a two-dimensional cutout. All of that is being added on by the mind. And that's what we're talking about with that.
And that happens in a lot of things where and that's why, there's a whole branch in psychology about Gestalt. Because it happens all the time, and we have a lot of experiences in our lives where we actually do not know what happened, but our mind has created a reality as if it happened like that. And we are sure that is what happened. That is what I know, that is what happened, but you actually don't. It's your mind that has filled in the gaps. You only assume to what you think happened. Or your parents have told you a story about, when you were 3 years old and you were biking on your bike and you fell over. And by hearing that story, you have created images in your head as if you remember it, as if you remember driving on the bike. Oh, yeah, it was red. And your parents go like, no, it was yellow. Your mom says, no, it was blue, your dad says. So it's like the majority of our lives is created by Gestalt. It's created by the brain filling out the blanks. And that is what we're basing everything on. And that's another reason why it's so important to see through the 6 Fetter and really, really become aware. How much do you actually know in your direct experience? How much do you actually know, and how much do you assume to know? And it's also why we are putting so much focus on releasing the experiences from the body, that whatever is there in the body, to give it kind of like space to be experienced, because you have no idea what it's about. No. We do not know what it is. We have no idea.
Nor do we need to.
We don't need to know. No, that's another thing. We don't need to know what it is.
Yeah. There's a big habit that we have of going to the mind to try to figure out, oh, well, this is here because of that time that something happened, or creating a conceptualization to because we feel like, well, if we just know why I, hate Brussels sprouts as much as I do, there has to be a reason. And then it's just go, I love Brussels sprouts. And that's not what we're talking about at all. Brussels sprouts are awesome, by the way. But that's not what we're talking about.
No, it is what we're talking about.
No, Brussels sprouts? No, we're not talking about the need to know that it happened when I was 4 years old and my little brother stuck a Brussels sprout up my nose, and then ever since then I've hated Brussels sprouts.
Exactly. You don't need to know the story, but it's really important to know that the brain fills out the blanks.
Exactly.
And the majority of what happened yesterday, you don't even remember. And if you are absolutely certain that you do, we really want you to be curious towards that. Really, if you can, for example, now, sit down and write everything down that you remember about yesterday. And every single thing you write down, be curious to, do you actually know that is how it happened? Are you sure about that? Are you absolutely sure about that? Or did your mind fill out the blanks at some point? Did something happen that you assumed was like that? Or are you absolutely certain that that is how it was? Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Good. Last pointer.
Last one. This is quick. 10th pointer. Is there any boundary between individual objects, creatures, or the sense fields themselves? And is any experience limited to one specific sense field?
Yeah.
So, already touched on this a little bit. But it's that recognition that, like I was talking about with the piece of wood that's carved into different things, or that we have an idea that there is such a discrete experience between the visual field and the sound field and the physical sense and smell and taste. And it's not something that we can just talk you into, or that it's not something to just conceptualize and just take on as like a point of faith. It's something where the more you really investigate the experiences themselves, that the fundamental nature of visualization being different from sound and sensation, physical sensation, all that,
and smell and taste,
and taste, starts to break down.
Yeah.
To where everything starts to be of the same sort of material. Wrong word for it, but
no, but it's the same. It's the same feel.
Yeah.
So you can hear music and taste it, or you can see a color and smell it, or you can hear a sound and feel it. It's very arbitrary when we think that seeing is in seeing and hearing is in hearing. It's what we call synesthesia. That the sense feels, like we say, we only have the 5 senses. You cannot rely on them at all.
Nope.
And what you hear might be what you smell. So also really being curious to that do not limit yourself. That you can sit out in the forest or sit on a beach and just let everything dissolve and experience with all your senses at the same time. And suddenly you can taste a wave because of the sound. What's that?
Is there any boundary between individual objects, creatures, sense fields themselves? Yeah.
That's another thing, and that's the first part. Is there any boundary between individual objects, creatures, or the sense fields themselves? I mean, if you have a pet, a pet that you love, not a pet that you don't like, but if you have a pet that you love, sitting and cuddling a pet that you love, that feeling of the boundary between the two of you, or for example, like you're sitting and holding me now, the sensation in that, there's no difference, there's no boundary at all. It's like melting together, and it's the same you experience also if you have a pet. Is what you experience, that sensation of boundary is dissolved.
Yeah. And actually, I think I've told this story before, but it's still kind of funny, that when I used to take care of my friend's golden retriever, that we would spend many hours together just, lovingly staring into each other's eyes. And that there were a couple instances where I had like very clear internal sensory perceptions of myself with his muzzle and his face, and that my arms had become his legs, and that internal sort of visual perception that exactly. I was more dog than man at that moment. The visual perception that we take for granted, that we don't even notice it most of the time, that's creating the sense of a body in the mind. It's creating the sense of me being located in time and space and all of that. That is very malleable. And if you spend enough time looking into anybody else's eyes or another creature, you can start to actually take on some of their, mentally you're taking on some of their attributes. So that was a really surprising example of it.
But it's really a good point. It's also like that exercise where you ask a person another question. You ask one another questions, and then you sit and look into one another's eyes, and then you're in love afterwards.
Yeah.
Because it's what happens, that it's like the boundary between you and the other person is completely dissolved, and you feel that person in you, as you. So yeah, that's another fun way to play with the sex fetter.
Yeah.
Was that it?
I think mostly.
Is that everything we wanted to say? We have so many pictures and videos and things that we're sharing, and it's gonna be a thing we continuously do, because there's life is amazing with sex fetter.
It is. It's such a fertile ground for exploration.
Yeah. The basic thing that we want to say is be curious.
Yeah.
Really
absolutely.
be curious. Really question everything that you think you know about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching.
Yeah.
Not the thought part, because detach that, but just what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch. really, really be curious to that experience and allow it to have very liquid boundaries. So it's very, morphing.
Yeah.
And also be curious to how anything you see can be felt, heard, smelled,
Exactly.
tasted, or touched, and vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, and what feels like the thing which is separate, and
Yes.
recognizing
Yes.
any of those five senses.
Yes. Who is observing
Who
and
is observing?
experiencing?
Yeah, exactly. As long as there feels like there's something in here that is separate, get really curious about that feeling of
Where, and
that.
what is it? That
Exactly.
little avatar with headphones on that is sitting and experiencing, and there's somebody sitting and experiencing him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be really, really clear on whether it's a physical sensation that's masking as something else, which is hearing or seeing. Is there a mental image that pretends to be seeing or hearing? Like wherever that seems to be. And then the other big thing, which I've mentioned already, but I think it's just super important to constantly bring this one up, is the need to relax when doing this stuff.
Yeah.
The sense of struggling and anticipating or expecting something creates such a feeling of separation. It creates this constriction, and we really just want to relax and allow the senses to show themselves as they are without us trying to force our way into making them something else. It's kind of like we go into it a lot of times, like if I put enough attention on the sense fields, it's going to be like dropping acid or something, and everything's just going to suddenly start shifting and changing. But it's actually the opposite of that. We want utter relaxation and just allowing the things to show up the way they are without all of the concepts and assumptions. Exactly.
All of the concepts and all that.
Drop that stuff and let the world show it. Let your experience of the world show itself for what it is, without all of the other layers put on it.
Yeah, and just have fun.
Have a lot of fun. And be humble.
Sit down. Be humble. I think that was it. It's really gotten dark.
It has. Yeah.
So nice.
It's a good time. Good we ended it in time before we're sitting in there.
Now I'm really curious to see if we started recording.
Fingers crossed.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, and welcome.
That hand was way out of frame. Hi.
Hello. Okay.
From one.
Do you know where you want to wave?
That hand's already in frame. Let's just use that one, shall we?
Or maybe not a wave. We need to say hello. Yeah, you wave. you take one to the team.
It's such an imposition for me to wave. I mean, I know. I'm willing to bear the sacrifice for the both of us.
Okay. I'm trying to stop laughing because
I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Okay.
You're steamed up, babe.
I know. Because you're funny. Hello. Stop looking at me like that. Okay, come on. Hello, and welcome to... Are you ready? Hello, and welcome to... Hello.
Hi. See, it's weirder when I talk, right?
It's even weirder.
It's so much weirder.
Wave, goddammit,
It's so
just
much
wave. What am I gonna say now? Hello, and hello, and
I so want to wait.
I did it. We're never gonna do this, are we?
No, this is gonna be.
Oh my god.
This whole video is just gonna be nothing but outtake.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah.